It is a blessing to be before you. It's a privilege to be before you. I pray that the words that I speak are in accordance with God's revealed will for us. Friday night, after we had cleaned the building, whether or not it looks like it, we tried. Friday night, we are on our way home in the Excursion, the big truck. A couple of the children are not with us, but Nathaniel and Raph and me, we're driving along. We lapsed into a silence. It was one of those silences where you didn't know you were in it until it was broken. It was broken about Theresa by Raphael, who said, "Daddy, I just forgot that we're in the Excursion." And I laughed, and I said to my son, "Been there and done that." The word is zoned out. Sometimes it happens when you wake up from a very deep sleep. And you wake up and you don't know where you are. It can be kind of scary. It's even scarier when you were not sleeping. But it's happened. It can happen in varying degrees. You walk into the next room and you forget why you're there. Or you can be wherever you are and you just come out of it and realize, I have no idea what I've been doing. Today's sermon is about being focused and serious and focused. It is the first, Lord willing, in a two-part series. Today we'll talk about being focused and serious, and next week we'll talk about some of the pitfalls that we fall into when we're not focused and serious. We need to be focused all the time in life. We must focus, and we cannot not focus. We must be serious all the time in life. We must be serious, and we cannot not be serious. I've chosen only 3 passages that, Lord willing, will cover this text. The first one is Ephesians 6. Passage number 1, Ephesians 6. Verse 10. Paul writes, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against powers, against the world forces of this wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand firm, therefore, having girded your loins with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, in addition to all, taking up the shield of faith, with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And take on the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. With all prayer and petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, and with this view, be on the alert with all perseverance and petition for all the saints." I'll stop there. I would suggest there are at least 5 things in this text, 5 things that I'll talk about right now, that emphasize that we must always be focused and we must always be very serious. First is the passage taken as a whole. You read this whole passage, and this is one of those passages that explicitly draws your attention to the wow factor of the world that we live in. You read this passage and you say, there's something big going on here, and something dangerous, and I need to pay attention. In 1938, there was Orson Welles. He read The War of the Worlds over the radio in New York City. Now, The War of the Worlds was written by another Wells in England, but they took and they changed the story a little bit to sound like Martians were landing in New Jersey and spreading poison gas all over the place. Some people in America turned into that late and did not realize that it was not a news broadcast. At the same time, many of these people were at a state of heightened anxiety Because over in Europe, there was the build-up to World War II. And many of the people who heard this thought the Germans had invaded. The phone lines for the police station started ringing off the hook. The radio station, the news broadcasters, people were panicked. They were in a heightened state of anxiety. This is what God is saying we need to be right here. Look at verse 12. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of the wickedness in the heavenly places. And yet they have come down and invaded. And you need to panic. If left to yourself, you need to panic. A friend of mine many years ago used to say this all the time. No, you don't understand. Now, he would be explaining to me something that he had gone through. And I thought I had been in a similar situation. And I would say, yeah, I get it. And he'd say, no, you don't understand. Now, that may have been a little bit prideful, but what he was trying to do is emphasize his point that he's trying to make. This is a passage where no matter how many times you read this, you don't understand. There is gravity to this situation. So I looked up synonyms for gravity. Acuteness, consequence, hazardness, or hazardousness, importance, moment or momentousness, perilousness, pressingness, seriousness, severity, significance, urgency, weightiness. You don't understand what this is talking about, and you need to read it and reread it and reread it to get some inkling of an understanding of what this is talking about. You cannot read this seriously and easily dismiss this. If somebody says to you, and this has happened here, you have cancer, that is nothing that's easily dismissed. I'm reading from Wikipedia. On December 7th, 1941, the Opana radar site was manned by Private Joseph L. Lockhart and Private George Elliott, who detected approaching aircraft at 7:02 a.m. This is when radar was brand new. The men reported their findings to the Temporary Information Center at Fort Schaefer. Private Joseph McDonald took the call. Private McDonald found Lieutenant Kermit Tyler when he had entered the plotting room. Tyler told him that it was nothing. McDonald called back to the Opana radar site and spoke to Private Joseph Lockhart. Lockhart was excited. He had never seen so many planes on the radar screen. Lockhart was excited. Infected with Lockhart's excitement, McDonald returned to Tyler. McDonald suggested to Tyler to call back to the plotters and verify Wheeler Field that the sighting, when Tyler again indicated that it was nothing. And that was the last time that mistake was ever made. You read this, and anybody who's serious understands God is telling us there's something on the radar, and you must pay close attention. Then there's the armor. It says, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God. We're used to armor. Actually, we're not so used to armor. They were used to armor, more so than we are. They were used to full armor. That's actually not what catches our attention here. What catches our attention is that this armor is from God. This is the fight. You won't win with the armor you're used to. You could pick any island. I'm picking the Isle of Patmos. So the Isle of Patmos is there. They're a little tiny little city-state. And here comes Rome. And Rome has the resources of the whole world. And they're coming. What chance does the Isle of Patmos have against Rome? None. But what if somebody came from the future and gave the Isle of Patmos all of the armory and all the technology that we have now in every world? China, Russia, United States, and gave it to them and said, here, now you can win. They'd say, great. But that emphasizes how much they could not win without having some extra armor provided. Now, we have to rely on God's armor because our artillery will not work. Physical, and what this is really talking about is mental. You throw all your human wisdom. You just take all the human wisdom that you yourself have and everybody else in the world, and you put it all together, and you think as hard as you can, and when you're done, Satan is laughing. And you know what he does? He comes disguised as an angel of light. You didn't even know. He's in your camp. That's what we call an unbearable situation. You have nothing. I have nothing. It's pressing down, and I have nothing. It's time to panic. There is the having done everything. Verse 10, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything. The word there is according to energy. If you have some energy, you throw it at this. And when you're done, you throw some more at it. Dad and I used to say, it's good enough for who it's for. You've heard that expression. Here, you will never say it's good enough for who it's for. That's not even going to creep up into your vocabulary. There will be no skimping with this. Having done all things. We sing a song, Soldiers of Christ Arise. It is from this text. Listen to it. Soldiers of Christ, arise and put your armor on, strong in the strength which God supplies. Now, I like the way the author does this because he'll say it twice. The second time is to build up to what's coming after that. So first of all, camp on this idea, strong in the strength which God supplies. Right? You need a strength. Then he'll repeat it, strong in the strength that God supplies through his beloved Son. We need to be in the Lord Jesus to derive any benefit from the Lord. Strong in the Lord of hosts and in his mighty power, who in the strength of Jesus trusts. This is setting us up for trust in Jesus, but it's going to tell us more. Who in the strength of Jesus trusts is more than conqueror. Not only do you win, you're more than winning. Stand then, okay, having that perspective, stand then in his great might with all his strength endued. But take to arm you for the fight the panoply of God. That word panoply means all, and you've heard of a hoplite. A hoplite is a Roman soldier. That's the oply in panoply. The hoplite is the one who is fully armed. The hoplite came armed to the teeth. You put on all the armor of God. By the way, the word panoply is our word put on the armor of God right here. Listen, leave no unguarded place, no weakness of the soul, and positively take every virtue, every grace, and fortify the whole. That, now that you've done all that, having all things done and all your conflicts past, you may are come through Jesus Christ alone, and stand entire at last. How do you get to entire at last? One of them is you don't leave any unguarded place. That having done everything that you possibly can. We live around Fort Drum, and what I've come to understand about the Army since living in Fort Drum is that they do a lot of drills. I wonder why. So that when they get into conflict, they're prepared. And they drill, and they drill, and they drill, and then they review. And then they drill, and they look for any possible crack. Forts have a boundary. And if they have enough manpower, the man is walking the boundary always. Not just once a month. We got it covered for this month. Always returning. Check and recheck. And when you're done rechecking, you go back and check again. You'll recognize where I'm reading from. The Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments And let them be ready for the third day, for on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for all the people all around. Beware that you do not go up to the mountain or touch the border. Whoever touches the mountain will surely be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people, consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. So it came about on the third day. What are they doing, by the way, for those 3 days? They're seeing the boundary. And even if there's no physical boundary, they're remembering, don't go near the mountain. Verse 18, Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Lord had descended upon it, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of the furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered, and the thunder of the Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. The Lord called Moses up to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And as soon as Moses got up there, you remember what he said. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, go down, warn the people. So that they do not break through to the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, or else the Lord will break out against them. Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set boundaries around the mountain and consecrate it. And the Lord said, go down again and come up again, you and Aaron with you. But do not let the priests of the people break through to come up to the Lord, or he will break forth upon them. So Moses went down to the people again. This is what the Lord is saying. You check and you recheck and you get everything in order. And then you go back and you recheck again to make sure there's no hole in that fence or that you've missed something. This is what this passage is saying. Then there is the enemy. I can think of two things about this enemy in Ephesians. In Ephesians chapter 6, two things about this enemy. Number one, he is unseeable. Number two, without God, he is unbeatable. He is unseeable. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood. And right there, you don't have a chance. The spirit world is real. It's as real as the fleshly world. He said, look, you live in this fleshly world, but I'm telling you about something else. You might not be able to see the spirit world, and sometimes you can see the consequences of, but even if you can't, there are consequences. When I was growing up, my cousin's neighbor had a condition, I never understood it, where he could not feel from the waist down, I think it was. From the waist down, he could not feel. So you could go up to him. I never did this, of course. You could go up to him and cut him, or he could be running along and trip and bruise his leg, and he wouldn't feel it. But that doesn't mean there were not real things happening, bad things, with his leg. Here's the point. The spirit world is real, but we can't see it, which means we cannot really understand it. Now, do you want to fight the enemy you cannot understand? Because you always fear what you don't understand, to quote the old saying. Let's illustrate it this way. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but do not know where it comes from or where it is going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. In John 3:8, the Spirit is for it. The point of John 3:8 is you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what's happening. Let me give you some information about how to read the spirit world. In John 3:8, the Spirit is for us. Here, the counterpart, there are other spirits that are not for us. And you don't know. In John 3:8, we take some comfort from that spirit is working for us, and we understand. But here we don't take any comfort. We have fear. And with the fear, we realize I need to have a heightened sense of anticipation, focus, and seriousness. This enemy is unbeatable, but for, I understand, be strong in the Lord, put on the strength of his might, put on the full armor of God. But without him, he is unbeatable. We cannot beat him. He is the devil. What does it say? Verse 10, the schemes of the devil. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. More powerful, more intelligent, more tools, more wickedness, and more winds. Every human being ever, save one, has lost. Every human being ever that has lost many, many times. And of them, most have lost the war. Everybody's lost a battle. Most have lost the war. Now, you're going to come along, and if you're serious and sober-minded, you're going to realize, I need God's help. I need to be focused. I'm in a lose-lose situation if I'm all by myself. The only thing you can do here, you got two options. Number one is give up. Or number two, give it all you can. Paul will say that he agonizes, he strives, working according to the might of God that works in him, right? So Paul didn't give up, but we have to be striving with the Lord's help and constantly aware. And then there's the alertness. Verse 18, with all prayer and petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, and with this in view, be on the alert. Some of your versions will use the word watching or watchful. The word is literally failure to sleep. And to be a bit more direct, it's not being able to go to sleep. I could not sleep because of, whether from anxiety or because of some external circumstances, the result of external circumstances which prevented normal sleep. Herodotus will use this word of Darius. So King Darius was in Egypt, and he was hunting, and he fell off his horse, and he sprained his ankle. And then he called the Egyptian doctors, and they came in, and they twisted it so violently that they popped the socket, they dislocated his ankle, and this word for 7 days and 7 nights. He could not, the pain was so excruciating. Just a minute ago, George was up here talking with Marcy about how a few nights ago he didn't get any sleep because somebody else in his family wasn't getting any sleep. Well, why didn't you sleep? Well, because of his concern. Around my house, I won't tell you the name of my dad, but sometimes I've seen him come down the stairs looking more tired, exhausted. It's early in the morning. Later on, Mom will come down and say, he was awake all night, worrying. Worrying so much, but whatever it is, that he could not sleep. This is exactly what the Lord is saying here. With all prayer, petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, with this in view. Be on the alert. This is serious. Whatever you're worrying about, this is worth staying awake over. The second passage is in 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking to someone to devour. That's 1 Peter 5, 8. 3 words I'm going to pick out of here. The first one is alert. That's a different word from our previous word translated alert. This is our word where we get our name Gregory from. Anybody who's Gregory ought to be alert. We all ought to be Gregory then, right? Be alert. This is the word. If a man of the house knew the time when the thief would come, he would keep himself awake. Be alert. Your adversary, the devil, if that weren't enough, prowls around like a roaring lion. There's our second word I'm picking out of this context. So there was the Sankubetsu, I probably butchered the spelling of that, but over in Japan around 1915, in November, a huge brown bear woke up from hibernation, much too early, and it went into the local village in mid-November, and it just kind of checked things out. It came back December 9th, and it started killing people. It came into the cabins. It broke into the cabins and started killing people. Now, would you be surprised? It killed 7 over the next 4 or 5 nights. Would you be surprised to learn that they set out watchers? Naturally, that's what you do. Some of you, some years ago, may have seen the movie The Ghost and the Darkness, based on a true event. The name of one lion was the Ghost. The name of the other lion was the Darkness. And back in 1915, or 1898, these 2 lions, 2 male lions, stalked the campsites, dragging workers from their tents at night and devouring them. I found it interesting. It's the same word that my version uses right here. Devouring. Seeking someone to devour. Some records say that these 2, over the course of all summer into the fall, killed over 100 people. The more conservative estimates are 28 to 31. It doesn't matter. Would you be surprised to learn that they had posted sentries to watch for these? No, not at all. That's naturally what everybody would do. Here comes the lion, and the Lord says, be watchful. So my mom and dad live in Belize. We've been there a couple times. Jake tells about the jaguars down there, or these cats. They call them cats. And what they'll do with dogs, Jake, I remember him saying, what they do is they grab the dog's head with one paw, bring it to their mouth, and crush the skull of the dog. And he said they could do this all day long. They could just keep on coming. People down there go through dogs. There's a woman down there, apparently others, that seemingly, well, she would show up every once in a while somewhere, I forget where, and get another dog. Somebody asked her why. Because the cats, the jaguars, had the gall to come up even onto her porch. Now, the reason that she got the dog, well, one benefit of having the dog was so it didn't eat her babies. This is what we call a sacrificial dog. We don't have that luxury. Did you notice who the lion is after here? It says, the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. I like the way the King James Version says it, in the New King James, seeking whom he may devour. It sounds like he's reading a menu. I don't know if I want Lee today, or if I want Selma, or John. Maybe I want them all. This is what it sounds like. The question is, am I next? That's the question. Am I? We don't know if he knows the menu. It's every name here. And he's trying to get any one of us and every one of us. The question is, am I next? Then there's this word, prowls. Verse 8, be sober, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls. Some of your versions will use the word walk, because that is the word. It's the same word that everywhere else is translated walk, but this has to do with context, right? The lion prowls. Around our house, we've been watching 72 dangerous, not friendly, 72 dangerous animals, Asia. One of them is the snow leopard, and the le is Leo, which is the word lion here, which dangerous animals, Asia, I looked on the map, and when they show the coloring where this goes, it goes down into this area. It could have been, I don't know what he's talking about, but this snow leopard, the people call it the ghost of the mountain. If it does not want to be seen, it will not be seen. Now you're in its territory. We're in his territory. There will be no going to sleep. There will only be focused seriousness. The third passage is 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 7. The end of all things is near. We panic in heightened alertness when we know the end is near. There's a joke. I want to go peacefully and in my sleep like my grandfather, not screaming like his passengers. I got to be careful with that. But you get the idea. When they knew the end was coming. Every synapse was firing. Their adrenaline was going. And they understand exactly they have a heightened sense of awareness. Therefore, be of sound judgment and sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. Read what Horace wrote in some 27 BC. The passion of the public, demanding what is wrong, never shakes the man of just and firm intention from his settled purpose. Nor the tyrant's threatening face, nor the winds, the stormy masters of the troubled Adriatic, nor Jupiter's mighty hand with its lightning. Should the world's ruins round him break, his confidence will not shake. Unmoved, he bears it all. The Lord is telling us our purpose and our intention is to be awake. And this is the only way that we'll be able to be successful. This man is serious. This man is focused. And this man does not allow anything wrong to distract him from what he knows is right. Then there's this word, be sober. Verse 7, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be of sound judgment and sober. It's the second word in the New American Standard and most of your versions out there. It's the second word. This word we've actually already seen. It was in 1 Peter 5:8. It was not in Ephesians 6, but in a parallel passage in 1 Thessalonians 5:8 it is. Let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, as a helmet, the hope of salvation. So this word runs throughout. Now I find it interesting. Likely, not a person in this room, well, maybe one or two of you will. Maybe you have. Likely, you are never going to face a situation where you have to put on literal armor. Likely, you are never going to have to face a situation where you will literally face a literal lion. But everybody in this room at some point or other is going to face this temptation right here. What this is talking about. We need to spend a moment talking about this. So the King James Version in 1 Peter 4:7, be you therefore sober. They have the word sober placed first. And then they have the word watch under prayer. It's the second word that we're always talking about. Be serious and watchful in prayers. The NIV, be alert and sober and of sober mind, so that you may pray. Be self-controlled, sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. The RSV, keep saying, I like that one, and sober for your prayers. The New American Standard, be of sound judgment and sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. The Cambridge Bible for schools and colleges defines this word, talks about this word this way. Strictly speaking, indeed, the word sober is wanted instead of watch for the second word. So if you have a New King James or a King James Version and it had watch as the second word, this is saying for now, it would be better if this, for the way we understand English, the way we use this word sober, now it would be better if the word were translated sober than watch. For the second verb, which implies, in the strictest sense, abstinence from wine or strong drink. Don't touch the stuff. Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, the usage is originally radical. A man is sober who is at that time completely unaffected by wine. In other words, he hasn't touched it. Benson's, the word rendered watch means to be sober, temperate, abstinent, especially in respect to wine, then watchful and circumspect. Pulpit, abstinence from strong drinks. Seiki Kubo, abstain from wine. Intermediate Greek English lexicon, to drink no wine. So I wrote somebody that I could trust and asked them what the Army's policy is on drinking. I wrote Toby Williford. He replies this: can't. Can't, as in you can't drink alcohol while on duty in the field or in combat. In deployed environments, some services have slightly different approaches from the Army, but in the Army, General Order number 1. Let that settle. General Order number, the first thing we want you to understand here, folks, don't touch it. I wonder if we can learn anything from that. In the field, while training, I'm not sure if it's a regulation or commander's policy, but it has been prohibited everywhere I have ever been. I suspect it is regulation because good order and discipline while operating in the field is a pretty standard requirement across the Army. Yeah. So you say, but Lee, it's figurative. And I understand. Be sober and watch. See, that's actually a figurative understanding of the word be sober. Be sober, serious and watchful, be sober-minded. Okay, that seems to transition a little bit into from literal into figurative. Sober-minded, be sober, and the New American Standard, be of sober spirit. Oh, by the way, the word mind, minded, and spirit are all added. Okay, that's there. That we understand this word that way. Okay, that may be so. It may be figurative, and I get that. For example, the word rendered watch means to be sober, tempered, abstinent, especially in respect to wine, then watchful. But here's the point. This is like the dog who got the car and doesn't know what to do with it now. Have you ever heard of something that's figurative diminishing the power of what they're talking about? Let me illustrate it this way. Don't give me any lip. What am I saying? Don't talk. Right now is not your time to talk. Can they give just one lip? Because after all, it's figurative. No, you say don't give me any lip, and the child knows he's being more than serious right now. If you give me lip, I'll wear you out. The child knows. It may be literal. Even if it is figurative, that does not diminish the application of the literalness. Did you see this? The word rendered watch means to be sober, tempered, abstinent, especially in respect to wine. So that's the basis for saying this. If you want to make the jump to it's figurative, fine. Then watchful and circumspect based on its literal understanding. There is a saying among drinkers who are trying to be cute. I would rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. No Christian says that. I find it interesting that a frontal lobotomy and a bottle in front of you will have the same result. It affects your ability to plan, your awareness, your ability to judge. Any Christian who has a bottle in front of them is acting as though they've had a frontal lobotomy. Do more of what makes you happy. Oh, no, I read that wrong. Do more, not of what makes you happy, but of what makes you holy. When His Excellency George Washington, he's talking about the Revolutionary War last week and today, and I am too. So I'm reading 1776. George Washington, when he accepted the command of the New England Army, when he showed up, they were called the Army Rabble in Arms. That's how they were described, rabble in arms. Characterized by drunkenness, drifters, tavern lowlife, dregs of society, exceedingly dirty and nasty. That's what George Washington wrote of the Yankee Army. Except for Nathaniel Greene. He stood out. Even his tents were all white and in a row. George Washington wrote, having volunteered to fight, they failed to see the sense in a lot of fuss over rules and regulations. Unfortunately, that sounds like Christians sometimes. They had a disregard for rules and regulations, regularity and discipline. And over here is Nathaniel Greene, standing out like a unsore thumb. George Washington said that he would not have accepted the command had he known the army that he was going to receive, except for Nathanael Greene. Washington found Nathanael Greene to be an object of confidence, George Washington wrote. Washington put increasing trust in Nathanael Greene, he would write. Washington put Nathanael Greene with the best of men possible. Washington put Nathanael Greene as the lead in the maneuvers when Washington conquered Boston. After he conquered Boston, he left Nathanael Greene in charge of Boston. When Washington went to New York City, he put Nathanael Greene in charge of Long Island, the most important position. Washington would write this: at Boston, Washington had known, the author of 1776 would write this: at Boston, Washington had known exactly where the enemy was, who they were, and what was needed to contain them. At Boston, the British had been largely at his mercy, and especially once winter set in. Here, in New York City, with the British's overwhelming naval might and absolute control of the waters, they could strike at will from almost any direction. The time and place of battle would be entirely their choice, and this was the worry overriding all other worries. And who did he put in charge of his defenses but Nathanael Greene? Nathanael Greene was 33 years old. He was the only general that had had no prior experience. How did he get there? Two things that I can see. Number one, he was a Quaker, which means he never touched the stuff. And number two, he would write John Adams, whenever he lacked in knowledge and experience, he tried to make up with two words: industry and watchfulness. That's the way to win the battle. That's what we've been talking about. I hope this has been encouraging for you. Thank you for your good patience in listening.